Opening scenes are important. Depending on the movie, it can establish your hero,
Yes, sir. I got it under control.
your villain, your world, your tone, your themes. Many of our best movies do all of these at once.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
But opening scenes also do something that I'd argue is even more vital, if less obvious. They tell us what matters.
That's impossible.
For instance, the opening scene of The Social Network tells us that its characters, their relationships, and how they can evolve
It'll be because you're an asshole.
or devolve are what matter. Meanwhile, the opening scene of Jurassic Park tells us that the danger and unpredictability inherent to its central premise, i.e. a dinosaur theme park, is what matters. And finally, the opening scene of a Saw movie well, let's talk about that. Now, sure, a serious critical analysis of a series like this might seem like a bold move.
Is bold the right word?
But I'd argue that the opening scenes of Saw movies, particularly those of the first and second films, can tell us a lot about how this series changed over time, along with its priorities. So yeah, happy Halloween, let's do this. Let's start with Saw 2. In this opening scene, we've got a victim in a dirty industrial space with a contraption around his neck that reminds us of, yet is not entirely identical to, one of the most iconic elements from the first movie. Our villain shows up, throws out some of his most popular catchphrases,
I want to play a game.
before giving the victim a violent and intentionally ironic ultimatum to save his own life. The guy fails, we get our first kill, hard cut to title, welcome to Saw 2. All of this happens in a scene that lasts 4 minutes, 4 seconds. Now, say what you will about the rest of the movie, but this scene, in isolation, is actually pretty fantastic. You could lop these opening minutes off the rest of the movie, and it'd more or less be able to stand on its own as an effective little short film. But that's the thing. This scene doesn't exist in isolation, does it? It is the cold open to the very first sequel in what would go on to be, at the time of this video's recording, a 10-film mega franchise that has altogether grossed more than $1 billion worldwide. With this hindsight, it's reasonable for me to argue that this is effectively the most important scene in the entire series. If Saw 2 had failed, the series, like its many characters, would have died right here with this film. And it all starts with that opening scene. So these first 4 minutes not only had to do the usual opening scene of a sequel stuff, like reassuring fans of what came before that they're gonna get more of what they love, while also welcoming newcomers, but it also had to basically define what makes a Saw movie a Saw movie. And in doing that, it basically sets the standard for the rest of the franchise. And let's zoom in for a moment on the last word I used there, franchise. These days we use it casually to refer to a series, brand, intellectual property, capital C content, whatever you want to call it, but let's remove it from the context of anything even remotely artistic so we can see it for what it actually is, a business term. As you can see here, Investopedia defines it as a type of license that grants a franchisee access to a franchisor's proprietary business knowledge. Okay, I don't feel like reading all that. Basically what it boils down to is, if you want to start a business and have just $500,000 burning a hole in your pocket, you can go to McDonald's and say, I'd like to start a business with training wheels, please. And then after a 5-stage selection process, they then grant you what they call a franchise opportunity. Basically, a template for how to open and run a McDonald's restaurant identical in product and operation to every other McDonald's on the planet. You can even go to the McDonald's franchising webpage right now and download their franchise guide, which essentially lays out what a prospective franchisee can expect to both bring to the table and receive in return. There's another resource called the Opportunity Pathways Guide that goes into even more detail, but the part I'm most interested in is a quote on one of its final pages, attributed to a franchisee named Dino from California, who sums up the whole concept beautifully. McDonald's has an amazing playbook, we just need to follow it. Because that's all a franchise ultimately is, right? A playbook, a series of common elements and experiences that we come to expect from a given brand. Within the context of Saw 2, its opening scene effectively establishes a playbook for the rest of the series to follow. A franchise guide that will guarantee a consistent experience regardless of the location and independent of whoever is manning the grill behind the scenes. Sure, some locations have better reputations than others, but at the end of the day, the experience ultimately tastes the same. So, as a franchise guide, how does the opening scene of Saw 2 hold up? Story and character-wise, we have a victim who, according to Jigsaw, has taken their life for granted, a gruesome situation or contraption they're stuck in, an equally gruesome and ironic test they must pass in order to escape, Tobin Bell's menacing delivery, and a vicious and visceral end result. Meanwhile, from a technical perspective, we have sped-up footage of the camera in motion, quick cuts that escalate as the intensity does, and a grimy, harshly lit industrial space in which all of the action unfolds. That is one hell of a playbook, and remember, they establish all of this in less than 4.5 minutes. Regardless of how you feel about this movie or the series as a whole, that's an impressive accomplishment, and it's even more impressive once you look at all the following installments and realize just how closely they followed the templates established by this scene. Therefore, the opening scene of Saw 2 gets an unqualified A+, 5 stars, 10 out of 10 from me as a franchise guide. Good job, movie. So while the scene does a great job of setting up this movie and the rest of the series to come, how does it hold up as the first scene in the sequel to the James Wan directed, Leigh Whannell written original? In the opening scene of this film, we've got not one, but 2 victims in a dirty industrial space, and holy shit, there's a dead body between them, and he's holding a tape recorder and a gun, and oh no, they're trapped here. Then they start talking, asking each other questions, trying to figure out how they got here, why this is happening to them, learning information about each other. Once the initial shock dies down, they start noticing details about their situation. The clock on the wall is brand new. Lawrence can reach the door, but he can't open it, and Adam finds an envelope in his pocket with his name on it and a tape labeled "Play Me." Lawrence then finds one just like it, only in addition to a tape, his envelope contains a single bullet and a key. Naturally, they try the key on the locks to their chains, but it doesn't work. Then their focus turns to the tape player, and they use the resources at their disposal to try and obtain it, and it takes them several tries before they get it right. Once they have the player, the tapes finally explain their situation. Lawrence must kill Adam by a certain time in order to save his family. Immediately, they start playing the game, noticing a hidden clue in Lawrence's tape that leads them to finding a garbage bag with hacksaws and something Adam doesn't want Lawrence to see. When the saws fail them, Lawrence realizes that they're playing a game of the Jigsaw Killer, and we flash back to the police investigation of previous victims, and that is the opening scene of the original Saw. When you place these 2 scenes next to each other, the change in priorities between their respective films becomes clear. Where Saw 2's opening tells you that the traps and their gruesome, visceral nature and violent results are what matter, Saw 1's opening tells you that its characters, their relationships with each other, the mystery of their situation, and how they go about solving problems are what matter. With these differing priorities in mind, let's take a look at the very first image of both films, that of a light illuminating darkness. In Saw 2, that light is revealed to be part of a flashy POV shot that literally puts you in the shoes of a character who, like the opening image itself, is immediately disposed of and forgotten once its function has been served. Meanwhile, the light in Saw 1 is used to illuminate the face of a main character, and it also serves as a devastating bookend for both the movie and the character whose face the light illuminated.
Key to that chain is in the bathtub.
Literally, the opening image itself is a piece to this movie's puzzle. It highlights the importance of paying attention to what's right in front of you, and how your perception of a person or situation can change based on the information you have at your disposal. These are themes the film explores in various ways throughout its runtime in nearly every scene, and they're introduced not only within the opening scene, but within the opening frames of the film. And remember how the opening scene of Saw 2 ran for a grand total of 4 minutes, 4 seconds? The opening scene of Saw 1, by contrast, runs for 15 minutes, 53 seconds, 18 frames. That's right, the first film in a series infamous for its breakneck pace and rapid editing style has an opening scene that accounts for nearly 16% of its total runtime. To me, this illustrates how the original Saw is more interested in building an engaging mystery and suffocating atmosphere than it is with gruesome violence and traps. Yes, the film does get gruesome and violent at the end, as a result of the mystery and atmosphere applying ever-increasing pressure on the characters until it all boils falls over. It's the high point of a crescendo that's been building for the whole movie. As for the traps, the ones we see in the original Saw are merely a means to an end, functional elements that serve the greater purpose of its story and mystery, as opposed to being the main attraction. And if we look at each scene involving a trap from the original Saw in isolation, the functional nature of them becomes clear. The movie even makes it simple for us by summarizing what we're supposed to learn from each trap by having the characters say it out loud at the end of each scene. The razor wire trap, for instance, is meant to establish the foundation of Jigsaw's MO, summarized by Dr. Gordon like this.
He finds ways for his victims to kill themselves.
The candle trap, meanwhile, is designed to establish a crucial piece of information.
Looks like our friend Jigsaw likes to book himself front row seats to his own sick little games.
Followed by a series of red herrings that conceal the real truth in plain view, one of those themes we were talking about. Later, the guy between the drills that Tap and Sing stumble upon pretty obviously serves as an obstacle that keeps them from catching Jigsaw when they had the chance. Even Amanda's trap has a greater storytelling function. This one isn't as immediately obvious since no one states its exact purpose out loud like the others, but when you look closely, it's pretty clear. Amanda's trap is meant to establish that Jigsaw will keep his word and let you go if you pass his test.
Congratulations. You are still alive.
This is vital for someone like Dr. Gordon to see because he's, tasked with killing a man in order to save his family. If this scene with Amanda didn't exist, you could reasonably question why Gordon should believe a single word the mysterious voice on the tape player is saying. At this point, it's fair to argue that every single trap in this movie ties in some way back to either our central characters or the central mystery, and that I think this is something the sequels lost sight of, starting with Saw 2. You can see this in how Saw 2 is structured. It's bifurcated into two discrete plot lines, Jigsaw's lair on the one hand and the nerve gas house on the other. In Jigsaw's lair, you have the main source of story and character progression with our protagonist, air quotes, Eric Matthews, confronting and learning more about the man behind Jigsaw. And where the primary conflict he faces is whether he can abstain from brutally assaulting an elderly cancer patient in his custody. Spoiler alert, he fails. While in the nerve gas house, you have the traps. And that's basically it. Until the traps go immediately off the rails and it turns into more of a standard slasher movie, complete with a crazed maniac chasing people around with a knife. This divergent structure is basically replicated in every one of the original mainline sequels. One plotline focuses primarily on overarching story and character progression, and the other plotline focuses on an almost entirely separate story that effectively functions as a torture device assembly line, taking you through a progression of traps one after the other. The storylines might intersect at the end, they might not, but for the most part, the traps and main story exist in almost completely separate movies. And it all starts here, in the opening scene of Saw 2, where the trap is the star and the character stuck in it is entirely incidental, used as a stepping stone to get us to the real story before being forgotten entirely. So let's return now to our original question. How does the opening scene of Saw 2 hold up as a reintroduction to the style, tone, and story of Saw 1? On a surface level, it certainly looks and sounds a whole lot like the original, but it's ultimately a fundamentally different experience. My best guess is the filmmakers of the sequel realized they had two types of fans. Those who enjoyed the characters' atmosphere and mystery of the original, and those who enjoyed the traps. And in answering the question of what a Saw movie actually is, Saw 2 decided a Saw movie should appeal to both of these fans at once, in separate parts of the movie, and one gets way more screen time than the other. I think this explains something that I struggled with as a teenager who absolutely loved the original Saw and yet got less and less excited as each successive installment came out. Sure, yeah, I was a lonely nerd who paid way too much attention to the writing credits and largely lost interest after original writer Leigh Whannell's name stopped showing up, but I think I also understood, however subconsciously, that the Saw sequels were movies increasingly at war with themselves, further spotlighting the traps that got most people through the door while paying less and less attention to the story that gave those set pieces meaning, until it all became a highly convoluted melodrama about a handful of characters fighting for Jigsaw's legacy, but who were never as interesting as Jigsaw himself. Some fans really enjoy the soapy nature of those later installments, and that's great. I'm glad they have that, but it's not what made me fall in love with Saw. And I really do think it's unfortunate that those original sequels weren't able to marry their story and traps in quite the same way as the first movie. When you're forced to funnel all of your clues, red herrings, character work, and set pieces into a single unified story, it's really impressive when you reveal you've had the wool pulled over our eyes for the whole movie. But when your characters exist in completely separate plot lines that don't interact until the final scene, it's a little easier to conceal and thus surprise us with how they're connected. In fairness to the filmmakers, this is likely a natural consequence of the accelerated 12-month production cycle these movies were placed on. The first film took years to get made, so naturally Juan and Dwinell had plenty of time to make sure the writing was airtight. Meanwhile, on the sequels, wouldn't it be easier for you as a writer to churn these things out in a couple of months every year if you could write 2 discrete plot lines and only have them meaningfully converge at the end? If at all? I think this could also help explain why Saw X was so well received in comparison to its older siblings. The traps were finally, once again, used in service of telling an interesting story rather than just being, well, gruesome theme park attractions. And this is why I was genuinely impressed that Lionsgate delayed Saw 11 by a year. Good. Take your time. Get it right. Don't rush it. I'd personally rather have a good Saw movie every couple of years than a whatever Saw movie every single October.
I know a few other companies that could stand to follow this example.
What a remarkable day of announcements about products that continue to make a profound impact on all of our lives.
And sure, Saw 11 could be disappointing. Maybe it'll squander all of the renewed life and goodwill that Saw X was able to breathe back into this series. But at least it won't be because they just repeated the mistakes of the past. And isn't that exactly what these movies are trying to be about? At the beginning of this video, I argued that examining the opening scenes of the first and second Saw movies could tell us a lot about how the series and its priorities changed over time. And what it really comes down to is the fact that the first film had the freedom to simply exist as a movie that happened to be called Saw, while its sequel had the responsibility of establishing and launching an entire franchise, which, as we've discussed, is just as much a business consideration as it is an artistic one. Therefore, I think it ultimately makes sense that Saw 2 chose to sacrifice some of the loftier ambitions and narrative cohesion from the first film in order to truly establish itself as a proper commercial enterprise. The filmmakers took the imperfect yet one-of-a-kind formula made up of slapdash ingredients and haphazard measurements from the first film and streamlined and synthesized it into an easily replicable, effortlessly digestible recipe meant for mass production and consumption. A decision that has paid off for the better part of 2 decades now. And counting. And it all started here, with the 4 minutes, 4 seconds that make up the opening scene of Saw 2.
But wait. What if that's not where the commercialization of the Saw films actually began? What if it goes all the way back to the short film? In order to attract funding for the first movie, Juan and Dwinell created a standalone short film from the reverse bear trap sequence, which ultimately caught the attention of Twisted Pictures and got them the funding, the stars, and the resources they needed to get the first movie made. Examining the two side by side, it's clear the opening scene of Saw 2 isn't setting the template for the rest of the series. It's following the template established by the short film. While James Wan, Leigh Whannell, and their team were invested in making a character-driven mystery, they were also savvy enough to understand what would get everyone else to pay attention, and, as it would turn out, get them to keep coming back.